Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Think on These Things podcast.
Welcome. We're so glad you have tuned in.
Yeah.
We have just been talking all day about the things of God, and we're excited about this podcast.
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Yeah.
It's fun to sit down and talk with my wife about things of God. We got excited about the Bible over lunch today.
We did. It was
That was
awesome.
fun.
It was awesome.
That was fun. So today we're going to talk about some fun things. One of the things we kind of get into has been a common theme recently is gearing your family toward ministry. So we had 2 of those episodes, and then we kind of jumped off and had our great friends Adam and Carissa King from Dear Young Married Couple jump on and talk about pornography.
Yes.
It was an incredible
Yes, it
podcast.
was so good. If you haven't had a chance to listen,
Yeah.
I encourage you to go back and listen to that. It was amazing.
I'll link it in the video at the end because you
Yes.
need to see that. It's pretty
Yes.
incredible. And so we wanted to kind of jump back on the train of talking about marriage and family and ministry, because we're seeing this thread, this common thread among people in our generation,
Yeah.
among people possibly a little bit older than us, and then especially people in our church. We're kind of seeing this come to pass where a marriage is kind of centered around ministry, and talk about what that looks like and the nuances of that, because if we're not careful, that can be difficult at times.
Yeah.
That there's some things that lie in wait there.
Yeah, I was thinking as a counselor, counseling a lot of people, pre-marriage counseling, people that are a few years into marriage, and people that have been married for a long time. There are a lot of dynamics that go into marriage. But then as we were talking with both of us being involved in full-time ministry, and very active in ministries together and separately, it brings a lot of dynamics to the table. And what we're finding is that people have a lot of questions about that. What does that look like?
Yeah, what does that look like? How does it manifest? How does it come to pass, as far as maybe roles in the home, roles in ministry. And so, we want to give you some lessons that we've learned there, because we've learned some hard ones.
We have.
Some of our biggest learning experiences. I was going to say fights, but learning experiences sound better.
Yeah.
Some of our biggest learning experiences have came because of ministry and what that looks like, and the roles that we're supposed to take. And so I think it's important to have those conversations, because there's going to be times, I think, one of the things that we need to kind of lay down at the outset is that there's going to be times where you're more interested in it than your spouse is.
Sure.
And so, you're ready to give your life for everything and give your life for it all, but maybe your spouse quite isn't there, and vice versa. It's not man and woman. This is kind of a gender neutral thing, because I've seen women that are ready just to go head over heels for it, and men that are kind of more reserved and not ready to take the leap, maybe.
Sure.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about that, just to kind of start us out. What does it look like when there's a spouse that isn't quite ready? How do you conduct yourself as a spouse that is ready? And then maybe as the spouse that isn't quite ready, how do you kind of keep from putting pressure on the spouse that is?
Yeah. So I think this particular idea or particular scenario where one spouse is more interested in marriage, or not in marriage, in ministry.
Oh boy.
Than the other, I think like anything in marriage, it requires seeking to understand and listening.
Yeah.
And listening to what your spouse is telling you. And that goes for both sides. The spouse that is, very interested in being super involved, and the spouse that is like, I think we better pace ourselves here. I'm not quite ready for that commitment. Really listening, asking questions, asking the right questions, which I'll talk about in a second, and seeking to understand what the other person is saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause this is my favorite saying. Clarity, one of my wife's favorite sayings is talking about seasons. This is just a season,
Yeah,
One of my favorite sayings is communication breeds clarity.
it does.
Because there's a lot of times where there might be a miscommunication as to why you want to
Yeah.
slow down, as to why you're so gung ho, and so you need to be able to communicate that clearly.
Yeah.
Don't let there be a lack of communication that drives this separation between you two.
Yeah.
It's hard to communicate. It's sometimes can be a difficult thing to share how you're feeling, to share what you're thinking, to take your ideas and your feelings and your thoughts and formulate them into like a cohesive sentence. But you need to do that. It requires work to be able to communicate with one another. But what that'll do is that'll breed intimacy in the relationship and connect your relationship and connect you to one another in a way that maybe you haven't before.
Sure. Yeah, because it can be frustrating. Or it is frustrating when you and your spouse are on opposite ends
Yeah.
of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so
Disheartening.
yeah,
Yeah.
when we say seeking to understand and listening, when I say that, asking the right questions, it's about
Right.
asking open questions to
Yeah.
your spouse. Can you explain to me more about that?
That's a good way to put that.
Can you help me
Yeah.
understand why you're feeling that
Yeah.
way? Because sometimes, like, for example, for the spouse that wants to be, gung ho and the other spouse that's not feeling quite ready, it could be easy for the spouse that wants to be gung ho to say things like, oh, well, I'm just passionate about serving God. Okay. And so
Yeah.
that's going to,
That's going to build a wall.
that's going to alienate your spouse.
Yeah.
But asking questions like, can you tell me why you feel reserved about that? Or can you explain to me more about why you're feeling this way? Or help
Yeah.
me understand what your goals are in ministry. Actually have done an exercise with couples before, because we actually do like I do this exercise with all couples, premarital and marital couples, about creating a wish list for your relationship.
Yeah, that's good.
And then I've done an exercise with couples where we create a ministry wish list, and the couple shares things that they're passionate about in ministry and what their goals are.
Yeah.
And then sharing that with each other.
Yeah.
It really helps understand where the other spouse is wanting to go in ministry.
Yeah, that's good.
And you may discover things that you didn't know about your spouse, or things that they're passionate about,
Yeah.
or really the gifts that God has given them that are in their heart that God can really use to serve his kingdom.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that people tend to forget is that as a husband and wife, you're a team.
Yes.
And the goal is for the entire team to succeed.
Yes.
So, we've talked about in times past concentric circles, which is there is life together, and then there is individuals within that, and they all make up their own concentric circle. Right. Well, your family unit is a concentric circle within the larger community, which within your larger church, then within the larger kingdom of God. And so you're a team that's a part of a bigger team. So imagine the United States of America. The Olympics are going on right now, and there's all of these different teams: gymnastics, swimming, basketball, and the list goes on. But they're all on the same team, which is the United States. And that's kind of how it is for us as ministry. There might be individual things that we do. There's going to be things that we do as a couple, but we're all trying to advance the kingdom of God. And I think that that's kind of what we have to remember here too, is that, yes, you have a personal goals. Yes, you have personal ministry, but then you should have, hopefully you'll have things that you'll do together, and you're a team. So there's not a person in the world that I think's a bigger fan of me than my wife. And it should be that way.
Yes.
And hopefully she feels the same way about me, that I am her biggest fan and her biggest advocate. Because if your spouse isn't going to encourage you, who in the world is?
Sure.
Our spouse should be the one that is encouraging us, pushing us, telling us, yes, you go do that. Yes, you go minister. And one of the things I wanted to say before we move on from this is the reason we want to communicate about these things is because it might not be that your spouse isn't spiritual. Like we think, oh, they don't want to do ministry. They must not be praying like they're supposed to be praying, or they're not reading.
Yeah.
Like there might be something else there.
Yes.
There might be other reservations. Maybe it's confidence issues. Maybe it's past hurts or things like that,
or anxiety.
social
Yeah.
anxiety, being able to minister to people, in front of people, whatever the case is. So really digging down there
That's
and finding
good.
that out is very important, but it requires communication.
Yes. That's good.
Anything you want to add there?
Oh, no, that was great.
Thank you.
That was great. I think that
She's my biggest fan.
I really am. I really am. It's
I
ridiculous.
know, it's like I'm going out of town to minister this weekend. This will have aired, yes. So going out of town to minister this coming weekend. She's all like, I'm telling her my notes, and it's going to be incredible.
It
That's
is.
so
It
awesome.
is. It is going to be.
And I'm just like, well, great. I feel great about myself going in. So if it's bad, I can come back and tell my wife, and she'll be like, oh, it was so great.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I'm the creepy fangirl on the side, like cheering them on.
I love it.
But
She's got like a shirt with my face on it. It's really creepy. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry.
anyway, well, one of the things as we kind of progress through these, some things that we've learned, one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording actually is we talked about spending time together and making your marriage a priority so that you have time to give of yourself in ministry.
Yeah.
So one of the lessons that I've learned.
I'm making notes while you're talking. I'm not texting. I promise.
Yeah.
There's things I want to say while you're talking about this.
Yes, feel free. So one of the things that I've learned is that the closer that we get to Sunday, the more he's going to start becoming engrossed in what he's preaching on Sunday and kind of
by engrossed, she means stressed out.
Yes, right.
And very anal. And what's the other word? Like,
don't say that on the podcast.
They know what I mean.
Yes.
And like hyper focused on that.
Yes. And he's going to be really focused on that. And so as a spouse, I realize that my needs are important to him and that how I feel and what I think is important to him. But I also realize that as it gets close to Sunday and when Sunday is here, that he is going to be carrying the burden of the church and carrying the burden that God has placed upon him. And I feel a calling in my heart that I need to do my best to support that. And so earlier in the week, we prioritized time to spend together, communicating, spending time together so that, when Sunday comes or Saturday comes, I'm not pulling on him, emotionally and saying,
with the children or whatever the case is. Yeah.
We never get to spend any time together. And I've struggled with that at times being a young mom and our children are 16 months apart and it can feel a bit overwhelming at times.
Yeah. The shout out to all the people that help us at church.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Golly,
yes.
we got a team.
They probably don't have time to watch this podcast because they're helping us with our kids.
Maybe they can watch it while they're watching our children.
But what I'm saying is that it's important that we prioritize time together so that, when he's getting ready to preach or when I'm preparing for music or teaching or different things that I'm involved in, we're not leaving each other with an emotional hole that needs to be filled by spending time together. Yes. And I think that that's really important. So that when he comes to church, when we are at church, it's not the time for us to handle marriage issues between us.
Right. Whether that's positive or negative. No, I'm not saying like I am awkwardly affectionate to my wife at church.
Sure.
Like from the platform, you looking good, girl. That kind of thing.
Of course.
Right. But yeah.
But like I know that after church, people are going to need to speak to him. They're going to need to talk to him. And so if our girls haven't found him first, I have the girls and we're rolling out the door because I know that he has responsibilities and that's why we prioritize our time so that I feel free to let him take care of those responsibilities and feel good about it.
Well, and this is the note. Let me pull up my notes. So one of the things that I think we take Mondays. I don't know about, physical Sabbaths. There's so much up in the air about that. I do know that if you don't rest, you can't pour out because you can't
Sure.
lead from a deficit. So I take Mondays. My father-in-law, we took over the church that he pastored. He's the bishop here, and he's been such a help. And he created a boundary for me
Yes.
that I didn't quite understand at first, but he created a boundary for me. Mondays, you leave him alone. And if it's an emergency, you call your care group leader, because it's our time. People don't understand the weight that a pastor carries when he walks away. And this is what one of the things we were talking about today. This past Sunday, I preached a sermon and I walked away feeling good.
Sure.
That is extremely rare.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the time, a pastor walks away thinking about what could have been, what you could have said.
Yeah.
I could have done more. I could have studied more. And the vast majority of the time, that's how it goes. And it's very rare that you walk away feeling good. You're emotionally spent. You're physically spent. You're spiritually spent. And think about this. When Paul wrote, I think it was in the book, is in one of the books of Thessalonians, he wrote this letter. And when he said, I pray the God of peace sanctify you wholly, WHOLLY. When he listed those things, he said, body, soul, and spirit.
Yeah.
And body we know, spirit we know, and then soul is considered in those parts to be the mind.
Yes.
So he broke it down into 3 parts. So when you preach, you're literally tapping into all 3 of those things.
Yes.
And so that's why there's such a deficit. And here's the catch to that. This is kind of where I wanted to go. This is the thought that I had when she was talking. If you don't give your marriage time, like if you don't take time for your marriage, then the time you spend in ministry is going to carry the weight of a grudge.
It is.
And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that now there's going to be times where ministry has to come first. Like if you get a call and there's an emergency and you have to run and you have to go. But if I take the time to pour into my marriage, then I'm already set up that when those times happen, I'm not going at a grudging moment.
That's right.
I'm going feeling good, because let me tell you, there's another side of this, and that's guilt.
Yeah.
That's the
right.
guilt of doing ministry when your wife's at home taking care of the kids.
Sure.
Or whatever the case is.
And we have worked to release each other
Yeah.
of the burden.
I'm doing better about that. I still get pretty, like she's got to go speak at a ladies conference coming up, and I'm pretty grudging about that. She's way more important to our church than I am.
That's not true.
And she leaves, everything falls
That's
apart.
not true.
I'm just the monkey up there dancing and hitting the
No,
things
that's
together.
not true. No.
She's the one spinning the wheel, making everything go.
But that's a great point, sweetie, because because
You called me sweetie on air.
I know. Because releasing each other to do what God has called us to do.
Yeah, that's a hard lesson to learn.
Yes, and that guilt or the grudge not being there, it's
Yeah.
very important. And there are seasons of that. Like he said, there are times where, maybe I know that
We're in one right now.
yes, there are times. I know Monday's supposed to be our day of, kind of spending time together and people kind of, contacting others unless there's an emergency. And the past few Mondays, I think maybe people have forgotten about that because we've been contacted.
I'm gonna have them get up and remind them
every Monday of things that are non-emergency. But we remind ourselves, we kind of like pep each other up and saying, hey, there's a time coming. We're going to spend time together. We're going to carve out time here.
Yep.
And it's very important. And we do check-ins with each other. How are you feeling? Are you doing okay? Or, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
And this is so important because if you don't take that time,
Yeah.
it's going to come out
Somewhere.
Yeah. And sometimes it can come out at a really bad moment, like at church or, when you're hanging out with friends or you're at church doing ministry together. And
it's going to come out with on your children.
Yeah. Or you're doing ministry together and you realize you're being short with each other in front of a bunch of people, or you're, getting mad at each other. You're getting irritated at each other, and it's going to come out. And so prioritizing that is extremely important.
It is. And, too, you talked about releasing your spouse from that grudge, or releasing your spouse from that guilt. That's work. I don't think people realize that. That's not a fancy little thing that you just pray about. And not to say that God can't do it, but it might be one of those things it's like a Paul, like a Paul thorn of the flesh type thing.
Yeah.
Where you just have to work at it.
You do.
And you say, God, I see and I know. Just help me.
Well,
And you might feel it.
Well, and kind of attached to this, and I want to say this before we kind of move on to some other areas. Attached to this is I've seen through the years, I've been serving in ministry for a very long time, and been working
18
counseling.
years.
Yeah.
It'll be 19 years this year.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
A long time.
Yeah.
But I've also seen where, because spouses have issues in their marriage, I've seen jealousy issues arise, and
insecurity.
And that's not a good trajectory for your marriage. If you're a wife and, you are insecure about your relationship with your spouse, and so you won't let your spouse do things without you or anyone that talks to him or, is asking of their time. You're very jealous and very, insecure, and that comes out in your ministry.
Yeah.
That is a good indicator that you have things to work on, in your marriage and together, things you need to work through together. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does, because I think I'm thinking back to moments in my life where, me and my wife were in an interesting position. I'll share our story. I'm not afraid to do it. I'm a confident man. I'm going to share our story.
Okay.
Moving here, she was serving as the music director in Mississippi. I'll make this short. And she was there for several years. We get married after close to a year of being there. We just feel like it's time. God called us back, or called us to Wilmington, called her back, and called me here. And we knew God had a plan, and obviously he did. But she came back, and when she came back, she kind of just melded in. Everything was the way it was before Ashley left. She grew up the pastor's daughter here. Everybody knew her. When she left, she was the music director. And so everything just kind of got back in place. And so I was searching for my footing, so to speak. And insecurity is this funny thing that will manifest itself in a myriad of ways. And it's not the same for every person.
All right.
And it's not the same for every situation.
Sure.
And so my insecurity came out there, and I started hammering her. I was hammering my wife. We were getting in some pretty good arguments.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. It was so funny. I remember one argument in particular. I don't know how I won't forget it. We had been in a new house, the house we live in now, for just a little bit of time, and we were sitting in the driveway in the Toyota Camry, and we were and I remember you were crying.
Yeah.
I was mad as a hornet. Yeah. And then I remember you looking at me and going, there's no resolve to this.
Yeah.
And we had that same argument over and over and over. And it always ended the same way, because the issue wasn't with my wife. The issue wasn't with our marriage. The issue was with me allowing God to take time to work on me and get me in the right place. Yeah. And what happened over the next, this was probably at least 4 years ago, because Viv wasn't here yet, I don't think.
Probably longer than that.
Yeah, probably longer than that. 4 years is an early estimate.
Yeah, probably 6 years.
So 6-ish years ago. And we've lived in the house that long. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So probably 6-ish years ago. And what God did over the next several years was he took Ashley and her love for me and her love for him, and he changed her.
Yeah.
And then he took me and my love for my wife and my love for him, and he changed me to this thing to where she is not what I thought she should be, because what I thought she should have been in that moment was wrong, but she's what God has called her to be. Yeah. And I am not what I thought I should be. Yeah. But I'm trying my best to be what God has called me to be. Yeah. And then what we do in that moment is it puts us together, the team that God designed for us to be. And I can actually feel the Holy Ghost telling you this.
I know, I'm crying over here.
I actually believe with all of my heart that if you will just allow God to create in you the vision of what he has for you and what he has for your marriage, then what you're going to find is it may not look like how you thought it should look, but
Yes.
it'll always be exactly what God wants it to be.
If you spend, and I feel like the Lord taught me this with my husband, and he's going to get really awkward. So just, look over here. He has a lot of natural gifts
Oh God,
and abilities.
I can mute your
And
mic.
he is very exceptional in a lot of areas. And so I could have wasted a lot of time, being jealous that I didn't have the same gifts. We both sing, but under no circumstances can I even begin to sing like him. Just don't say anything. Don't be awkward. But under no circumstances can I even
I feel like
sing
getting hot in
like
here.
him. But I believe that God has taught us and that he wants for each marriage is a celebration of each other's God-given abilities.
That's a good way to put it.
Yes, and
Yeah.
not, how can I complement the gifts that he has? And when he talks about God changing him, he has learned to support me in the gifts that God has
Yeah.
given me. And we can both be in our roles in the divine order of the home, but also
Which in 4 minutes we will have to hit, because that's a good point.
yes, but we can also, celebrate each other.
Yeah.
And also related to that is that when I can celebrate him and celebrate what God is doing in his life,
Yeah.
then I have no problems sharing him with other people. I have no problems with him being a blessing to other people. I don't spend my time being jealous of, people wanting his time or needing to speak with him or asking him to do things, because I'm celebrating with him. I'm rejoicing like, yes, this is what God is doing in your life. I'm thankful that you get this opportunity to share with other people what God is using you in and how he is using you to edify his kingdom and edify other people. And I think that's a powerful concept, because I've seen spouses be jealous of each other, be jealous of, I can speak as a woman because I am one, but be jealous of their husband, maybe
Authority on the fact of you're a woman.
exactly, but be jealous of, their spouse having to maybe minister to ladies in the church or minister to other people.
Yeah.
And they're so insecure that they can't take that. And so that's an issue that you've got to, first of all, work out in yourself. And if you need to seek counseling, if you need spiritual counseling, but also work with your spouse on that issue so that you both can work and minister in the ways that God has called you to minister.
Yeah, and too, I think it has a lot to do with natural gifting.
Yeah.
Like, I think one of the things that in my early in our marriage, when we were talking about that fight, I wanted to do some of the things my wife was naturally good at, like just being able to deal with people, being a great administrator. She's one of the best administrators you'll ever find. And so I think what happens though is that if I want to be that, or if I want to do those things, then I'm not fulfilling my role in the marriage well, because God put us together. And so, the Bible talks about the body of Christ being fitly framed together. A marriage is the same way.
Yeah.
When it's God's will. Now, here's the thing. You can marry somebody and be totally different, but if it's when it's God's will for you to be together, then you're going to find how that each other can change to suit the marriage, the purpose of the marriage, the calling of the marriage, the callings of each other. And I think that's important that we can get to that place. And here's the thing that you need to understand. You can have a strong wife that is still submitted.
Yes.
And you can have a laid back husband that is still
The head.
the head of the house. And we're proof of that. My wife is a strong personality. And in fact, that's one of her areas. I think I can say this and you're okay with it. That's probably one of the biggest areas of improvement for her.
Yeah.
Or when I say improvement, meaning when God worked on us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was the opposite. And that's
Yeah.
one of the biggest areas of growth for me, is being able to approach subjects. I hated confrontation. I still don't like it, but I'm a lot better at being that authoritative figure. And so what God does in those moments is he takes us and he begins to work on us to the point that we are in order. There is a divine order.
Yes, there is.
And you can never be blessed outside of that divine order. That's why Jezebel, like we talk a little bit about the Jezebel spirit, but that's why Jezebel was such a nuisance, is because she went completely against God's order. And there's so many people that live an unsubmitted life.
That's right.
Whether it's a wife unsubmitted to her husband, a husband unsubmitted to a pastor or to God, a pastor unsubmitted to God or some other type of godly authority or mentor.
Yes.
People that live unsubmitted lives, number one, they're not going to be blessed. And number two, they're not going to be used. It's just not going to happen. Now, there are times like God spoke through the mouth of a donkey. You might broken clocks, right, twice a day. You might get used every once in a while, but it's never going to be to the fullest extent of what God has for your life if you're not submitted to your man of God. And you have to be.
Yeah.
And that's why the wife is submitted to the husband, and the husband is submitted. If he's not the pastor, I believe he's submitted to the pastor, who is submitted to Christ. Because the Bible, Paul told people, follow me as I follow Christ.
That's right.
So the husband should be following the pastor and in turn following Christ. And the wife should follow the husband's lead.
Yeah. The husband is submitted to God. And when God has placed godly authority and pastors and shepherds of your soul, and what you'll most often find, and once again, I feel like I can say this because I'm a woman, women who are not submitted to the authority of the church, they're probably not submitted to their husbands, and it's all trickling through. They're out of their role. They're unsubmitted. And so you may be a pastor or a minister, and you may be dealing with, perhaps, and I'm not picking on women, because I, as my husband has said, that's been a huge area of growth that the Lord really helped me with, that when you are dealing with an unsubmitted woman, chances are she's not submitted to her husband either. Yeah. And it's manifesting in other areas of the church.
Well, and two, there's different forms of unsubmission, right? There's not, like, if she's manipulative with you, she's probably manipulative with the pastoral team too. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like, you can be unsubmitted in multiple ways.
Well, it's like we talked about the other day when we talked about when sin entered the world.
Talk about it.
And God, the Bible says that women would desire to rule their husbands. And that desire to rule, some people say, "Oh, I'm not an overbearing woman. I don't tell my husband what to do." But you know what you're doing when you use guilt, you use tears, you use manipulation, you use sex, you use grudges, you use the silent treatment, you use flattery to control and manipulate. And that's what the Bible was talking about. When you use those things to maintain control, and you use those things to manipulate and get your way behind the scenes.
That's unsubmission.
Even though it all seems kind and good and well. But when you're submitted and you're in the role that God has called you to be in, God will open doors for ministry that you never even dreamed possible. Yeah. And he will put in you a contentment and a wholeness. Yeah. I know that we've talked about before about Gary Thomas and his book, A Lifelong Love, and he talks about how marriage isn't designed to make you happy, but it's designed to make you holy. And that a God-centered marriage can refine you, make you holy, can show you the areas where you're selfish and show you the areas that God needs to work on you. Yeah. And you'll see God do things in your marriage and in you and your husband's lives that you never dreamed possible.
Yeah. And one of the things that we probably, as we're finishing up, we kind of got on this subject, but I think it's a good subject, talking about being submitted, because when the woman's submitted to the man, it's into God's divine order. Yeah. And then when the man is submitted to God and to his leader, whoever that may be, like me, I have multiple mentors, but I have one person I would say I'm pretty well submitted to. I think that what you'll find is that there is a mutual turn toward one another. Yeah. That whenever I'm submitted to Christ and I look at my wife, I will say, man, I really want to see her succeed.
Yeah.
And I really want to see her do well. And the same thing for the wife.
And I think then what comes out of that, and I know we're running out of time, so I just want to hit this really quick. I think what comes out of that is, of course, accountability to God, but accountability to each other.
Yeah.
Not excusing each other's bad behavior. There have been times in ministry and as a leader, my husband has come to me and said, I'm just a little bit concerned about how you said that or how you dealt with that situation. And, I'm just wondering if maybe, maybe we could have done something different there. And because we have such a good rapport with each other.
That has actually happened. I'm actually thinking about times where that's happened.
Yeah, that's happened. Yeah. And because we have a good rapport with each other, because we've worked on our marriage, because we're on the same team, because we celebrate each other, it's not easy to hear, but I can take that knowing he has my best interest at heart. And in turn, I've gone to him and be like, what did you mean when that happened? And we've, hold each other accountable. We don't excuse bad behavior from each other because we love each other too much to allow the other person to maybe continue in something that maybe they're not even aware of that they're doing.
I can think of times where you've done the same for me, like where maybe there was a time where I favored someone else over you instead of protecting you. I just took the high road and not in a good way. Sometimes you have to do that. But there are times where you shouldn't do that, and you need to stand your ground, and you need to protect the one you love. And so we've had those conversations.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you are on the team together, and there is that true love for one another that is reciprocated and displayed, and you're in submission, you'll be able to have those conversations.
And you want to see the other person succeed,
Yeah.
not only in marriage,
Yeah.
not only in ministry, but most importantly, you want to see them succeed in their relationship with God.
That's it.
And
going
so
to heaven, man.
It's like related back to our podcast with Adam and Carissa. I've seen through the years too many spouses that will allow their spouse to continue in bad behavior and cover it up for them instead of saying, hey, let me help you walk through this. Let me help you find recovery. Let me be there for you. Because first of all, I'm here. I want to support you in succeeding in your relationship with God.
Right.
And that's what we want for each other.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I've seen couples, like one spouse will cut the other spouse down in public.
Yeah.
And you get a small glimpse. There's a small window.
What must their home life be like?
Exactly. And what it is, it's unsubmission. It's not on the same team. It's that thing. And it's just having fun. No, we're a team.
That's right.
And teammates look out for each other.
That's right.
And so I think, maybe if you do that, dig into why.
Yeah.
Because there are some traits you gain from your family that you don't need. There are some things that every family has that is not healthy.
Yeah.
I've figured that out. And so really find yourself in prayer about, what does God want me to do?
Yeah.
What does God want my spouse to do? And what does that look like us doing it together?
Yeah.
And when you pray, say, Lord, I know there's going to be times where we can't do it together. And when those times come up, help me with it. But I want to be my wife's biggest fan. And I want my wife to be mine. And you're going to find yourself really blessed. Be comfortable in your role. Not everybody's like my wife and is going to have a ministry where she's speaking and she's singing and she's leading worship. Sometimes wives are in the background just working. There are men that are in the background working while the wife is ministering. You know what? Be comfortable in your role. Be confident in your role.
Absolutely.
And God will bless it.
Oh my goodness. Well, we just had way more to talk about than maybe we even imagined.
Yep.
So, but this was a great conversation, and we would love to hear from you guys. We want to hear your feedback. We love to hear your questions and comments.
Yeah.
And so if you have a question or a comment, hit up the comments section, or you
Yep.
can always text the word think to 910-600-0498, and you can text your question or your comment. And we love to hear from you guys. Thank
Yep.
you so much for listening.
Yep. And as always, you've been watching the Biblos Network.